There will be sea trials by mid-2025. And then the idea is that in end 2025, particularly hopefully in November of 2025, when there is a major festival that is celebrated along the coast, particularly in the state of Odisha, relating to ancient voyages called Bali Yatra, and which is done on the date of Kartik Purnima. So what happens at this festival of Kartik Purnima is that families, usually the women of the family, go out to a water body and they put a small paper boat or a banana or made from banana stems, and they put a lamp and they put it in the water body. And this has been going on for thousands of years. And what they're effectively doing is enacting the date on which the menfolk, the Sadhava sailors, would sail out. So what basically you're enacting is the children and the women are going out and saying goodbye to the menfolk as they set sail for distant lands. And during that time, there is also a fair that is held in Cuttack called Bali Yatra, which literally means the voyage to Bali. So effectively what they are enacting is saying goodbye to the sailors who are heading off to Indonesia. Now, why do they do it in Kartik Purnima and not any other time? Well, they do it because of the winds, and I will come to that. But because this is the time when the wind stops blowing from south to north, which happens during the monsoons, and switch to blowing from north to south, which is what you would need if you were heading southward. So we have two possible routes that we could use for sailing this. One is, of course, the Gujarat to Oman route, which is, of course, a very ancient route going back all the way to the Harappan period. And then there's the other somewhat longer route, which is the Bali Yatra route, which is important to remember that even after working out the monsoon winds, the route to Indonesia was not directly across the Bay of Bengal. The reason for that is obvious. If you use a square sail, you have to sail with the wind. And the wind is blowing from northeast to southwest, right? So you have no option but to sail downwards. If you were setting off from Bengal, Odisha area, you had no option but to sail essentially towards Sri Lanka. And along the coast, they would stop in places like Nagapattinam, for example, which is on the Tamil coast. And then they will go on to Trincomalee, which is near in Sri Lanka, and they would refuel, pick up water, etc. Now, after reaching there, interestingly, they would go across to northern Sumatra. How would they do that? They would do that because they were using the cross-oceanic currents. And this is important. The current is a very important part of this. You can sail down all the way, but if you have to cross, you actually have to use the current. It's not the wind that is used. And then once you reach the other side, you then use the local wind patterns to sail your way through to all the way to Bali. So the one on the right is the longer journey that one could do. So here are the wind patterns, as you know, south to north in the monsoons and the opposite direction in the winter. And the winter patterns is what you want to use. It's 10 to 15 knots, which is 18 to 27 kilometers per hour. So but it's mostly steady, although you do get occasional storms and cyclones and so on. So one has to be a little careful, but on a good day, you should be able to do about 20-25 kilometers of wind, which will help you along your way. And as I said, there are the surface current vectors, which are absolutely critical. And what is interesting about the Indian Ocean is that just like you have the wind patterns, one direction and the other direction, the same thing happens with the currents. So because the Indian Ocean is in some ways a very interesting ocean. It is very different from the Pacific or the Atlantic in that there is no northern half, the northern hemisphere part of the Indian Ocean is very limited. It's mostly a southern hemisphere ocean. So when the winds blow, they blow the water into the land, and then the water, obviously, conservation of mass means that it get flipped into a particular pattern. And when the wind turns, it flips it into the other pattern. So when you sail downward using in winter, you will come to the Nagapattinam, Sri Lanka area, And all you have to do is go a little bit south from there, and you can use the current to cross across. So that is an important thing. And in fact, traditionally, the saying was that the Cholas would sail the Indian Ocean by watching how the turtle migration would happen using these currents. So it's not just human beings, but also nature that uses these currents for mass migration. And the current speed, again, can be, it's much, much slower, as you can tell, but it is steady and can go. There is also the wave heights that you have to look at. There's 1.2 to 2.4 meters. Of course, it changes dramatically if you happen to have a cyclone of some sort.